Well, of course, the Commission, which is coming at the end of its mandate, his job was framed by events, not by a program. At the end of the day, our mandate was dominated by two black swans, the pandemic and the war, and the consequences of the war, energy, inflation, etc. What can we say now? I think we have economically a decent outlook. We are back to growth, not in Germany, but overall we are back to growth. We have an excellent labor market, very low unemployment, and we are back near, I think we will reach the 2% target of inflation during next year. So we are, of course, changing our monetary policy. This is for the bank to decide. So overall, a weak growth, but nothing of the terrible prophecies that we heard in the last 2 or 3 years. Recession, blackouts, divergence, divisions in Europe in front of the Russian invasion. From this point of view, things are okay. At the same time, the Commission and the European Union moved, but the world moved faster, faster, and faster. And so for the new political cycle, challenges will be very, very high.
Two Italians who have held the same posts as you are, Mr. Letta and Mr. Draghi, have been tasked with trying to find solutions, remedies for the problems with the single market and of competitiveness as well. It was alluded to by the Prime Minister, Mrs. Meloni, just now as well. How difficult is it going to be for the new Commission to find routes to get that competitiveness better and indeed also to improve the single market and make it fit for the 21st century?
It's a huge challenge. Why? Because three of the main pillars that we experienced in the last 20 years are crumbling. We had cheap gas from Russia, we had unlimited potentiality of trade with China, and we had security guaranteed by America. All these three things are changing. Cheap Russian gas, forget it. And with trade and with security, things are changing. So I completely share the sense of urgency that the two reports you were mentioning from Letta, and we'll see next Monday the one of Mario Draghi, are sending. Because yes, European Union was able to address this dramatic crisis in a strong way. There is no more a passion for leaving Europe after the British experience. But there is an enormous challenge because the world changed, and the risk for us is that we change too slowly as Europeans.
And in addition to that, we are facing a situation where some European business leaders are saying, yes, we need more protection. Other European business leaders saying, no, tariffs are detrimental because we cannot sell to China as well. You've got a presidency which, who knows how it's going to go in the United States as well, which could add tariffs to everyone selling into the United States as well. The outlook, despite what you said about coming out of recession, it looks pretty tough for the new Commission.
Well, I think you can look at this from two different perspectives. First, the risks that we were running and that now I think are no more there. So the economy is growing, slowly but growing, and the risks of differences among the European Union that was very high when the pandemic happened are very limited. If you remember, there was a terrible acronym in Europe which was PIGS, and referring to a certain number of countries that were weaker, that were growing slower than the others. But now the map of the growth of the European Union is very different, and not with such enormous differences. So this is the good part of the story. The bad part of the story is that if we don't raise our capacity in terms of competitiveness, if we don't make enormous progress in what we call the Capital Markets Union, and if we don't address the challenge of defense, I'm only mentioning these three things.
Amongst others, yeah.
Among others, if we don't do that, well, the new situation of the world will appear very difficult for Europeans.
But the speed of decision making, and I spoke to Mr. Orban here in Ambrosetti just a couple of days ago, cannot be aided when, dare I say it, countries such as Hungary can block speedy action. We've talked previously about qualified majority voting, another key tenet of getting Europe to be able to move quickly and swiftly, and it's just not there yet, sir.
I completely agree. I think that this is something the new political cycle should address. I think that the new president of the European Council, the Portuguese Antonio Costa, will particularly try to address this issue. But look, on the other side, I had the task in these months to address, for example, the issue of economic support to Ukraine. And I have to say that with all the difficulties of our decision making, Europe was able to deliver. And we saw in our partners, for example, our American partners, how difficult it was also for them to decide. I'm saying this to say that, unfortunately, the fragility of decision making is a problem in our democracies. It's not only a European problem. Of course, Europe has differences because we are not a state. We are a different body. But decision making proved to be very challenging, not only for Europeans. We were able to decide on Ukraine even better than other global players.
I know your time is very limited as well, but what's going on with the budget situation in Europe as well? Obviously, it's not just Europe. We're seeing it in the United States and United Kingdom and elsewhere as well. But when France can't even put together a budget because it hasn't got a government, and when they do finally put together a budget, we're talking about a deficit somewhere in the region possibly of 6%. That's the rules blown out the window again, sir. It's not a great bedrock for growth going forward.
Well, as you know, we have a new prime minister in France. I understand that this created a lot of controversy internal, but I'm not entering in this controversy. I only know that the new prime minister is a very wise person. He knows very well Brussels, and we are already discussing with them how to address this situation. Of course, a country so important as France is cannot be an exception on our fiscal rules. We need to be flexible, we, the European Commission, but France has to address with a midterm plan the necessity of a fiscal adjustment. It is impossible to have 6 point something deficit in 2025.
Let me ask one more question and then I'll let you go, sir, because I know you're very busy. Where do you see the biggest external threat to Europe coming from? And I know it's almost impossible to choose, but I mean, we've got obviously the Russian threat on our doorstep here in Europe. We've got the Chinese competitive threat, which many people are very concerned about and what a trade war would look like, or potentially a Trump presidency, which is still in the balance as well. All of these factors can create huge problems for Europe.
Well, first we should avoid all these factors to merge. And support Ukraine, keep the doors of international trade open, which is not accepting China's position. Of course, we abandon our ingenuity in the trade relation with China, but this doesn't mean that we can accept the idea that international trade and international trade rules is over. I think these are the two main challenges that we have to resist at. Honestly, I think that a change in the US administration, meaning Trump winning the elections, of course it will not be welcomed in Brussels, but I don't think that the change would be enormous in terms of economic relations. It's, I think, more important, more delicate from the point of view on how global democracies are reacting to global autocracies. This is the real challenge, maybe in the role of a new American president. I don't think that tariffs will be the main story, because of course also democratic administration are defending their own interests, and we know this very well.